Question number 11 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 5. In passage 1, Beecher makes which point about the status of women relative to that of men? So women relative to that of men. What does Beecher say about women with respect to men? Well, she does say, I think, that they hold a subordinate position in society. That's just what I remember. Again, realize this is a quote question, so the quotes for 12 are going to support the answer to number 11, so we have to answer these together. But let's take a first pass at 11, see what we can get rid of, what we think is right, what's wrong, before we move on to solidify our answer for 12. Women depend on men for their safety and security, but men are largely independent of women. So again, if you internalize her belief that women are subordinate to men, you might be inclined to think that A is maybe correct. However, does Beecher ever say, remember this is passage 1, does Beecher say anything about how women depend on men for their safety and security? Whether or not you believe that might be true or not, based on what Beecher has said, did she ever say anything about security and safety? No. But men are largely independent of women. Again, whether or not you might take away from Beecher's passage, that's true. Did she ever say anything pertaining to safety or security? No, we never talk about these words. Don't let the College Board put words in your mouth. What about B? Women are inferior to men. But so, again, they're coming out of the gate pretty strong here. Inferior means, I guess, subordinate, but it's like, in a way, it's a synonym, but it's somehow stronger. It makes me feel uneasy about it. But women play a role as significant as that played by men. Maybe. Because what does she say? Doesn't she say women hold a subordinate relation? Heaven has appointed the one sex the superior and one sex the subordinate station. But while women hold a subordinate, line 6, a subordinate relation in society to other sexes is not because it was designed that her duties or influence should be any less important. So it literally says women are inferior. It says that. But women play a role as significant because women change the world through their own sphere. And that's unique and special than the way that men do it. B, at first when you read it, you're just like, oh man, this sounds really wrong for some reason. But in reality, that's exactly what Beecher says. Let's look at C. Women have fewer rights than men do, but women also have fewer responsibilities. Okay, I don't think, maybe you can argue women have fewer rights than men do. Even though we don't really talk about rights, we just say that they have a subordinate station in society. That doesn't actually say that they have fewer rights. Even though, yeah, you might say, well, George, they do. They actually have fewer rights at this time. It's like, okay, we never talk about that though. So that bothers me. I'm not saying it's wrong, it just bothers me, that first part of C. But women also have fewer responsibilities. And here's the part why this can't be right. Where does it ever say that women have fewer responsibilities? It never says, she never says, well, you know, this whole subordinate station is justified because women have fewer responsibilities, you know, so it's kind of, you know, risk reward, you know, we don't have to do things, therefore we don't have as many responsibilities. They never once say, Beecher never once says that women have fewer responsibilities than men do. She just says they are of a subordinate station. But, and what does she say? It's not because it was designed that her duties should be any less important. I like this quote in orange and yellow because it's talking about the fact that she's admitting women are inferior, but it doesn't mean that they're any less important, i.e. women play a role as significant as men in B. Fewer responsibilities, never talk about fewer responsibilities. What about D? Women are superior to men, but tradition requires women obey men. So this is not what she's saying. She never once says, well, women are actually superior to men, but you know, the way that the structure and hierarchy has worked makes us forced to obey men. She actually argues the opposite. She says that women hold line 6, women hold a subordinate relation. So she does not say women are superior. She says subordinate or inferior, can't be D. I think the answer for number 11 is going to be B, but just to be sure, let's take a look at the quotes in 12. Question number 12 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 5. So this 12, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question, is related to question number 11. And we think that the answer for number 11 is going to be B. It seems the one that is most consistent with what we believe Beecher has said. A, C, and D are all wrong for one reason or another. Again, I think that A, you know, was not good because of their safety and security. D was also not said. B was a good bad answer. Women have fewer rights than men do, but women also have fewer responsibilities. And they never once talk about the responsibilities of women, so that's why it can't be C, or the fact that they have fewer responsibilities. I think it's going to be B. Let's find a quote, though, nonetheless, that doesn't worry about these answer choices for 11, but answers this one question that's being asked in number 11. In passage 1, Beecher makes which point about the status of women relative to that of men? So let's read a quote, and we need to answer this very pointed question. Does this quote say anything about the status of women relative to men? That's the question you have to ask yourself before you read the quotes. Does this quote talk about the relation of women with respect to men? Let's take a look at 6 to 10. But while women hold a subordinate relation in society to the other sex, so while women are inferior to men in some way, subordinate, lower station, it is not because it was designed that her duties or her influence should be any the less important or all-pervading. She's saying just because women hold a lower position in society does not make her duties or her influence less important. I like that. It's literally saying that women are inferior to men, and it's also saying women play a role as significant as that played by men. Women play a role as significant as men do. Their influence is not inferior or it's not lesser than men, so that you can infer if it's not less, it's either the same or greater than. So I like A. A answers that question because it's talking about what do women, what's women's position with respect to men. If we just answer that question in isolation, it answers it in this, and it also answers what we think the answer to be, which is B for number 11. Let's take a look at B for number 12. Does this quote 13 to 14 make a point about the status of women relative to that of men? A man may act on society by the collision of intellect in public debate. Notice on how that only talks about men. This has nothing to do with women. So realize that the quote has to encompass everything that's being asked in the question before it. The question before it's talking about what's the status of women relative to men, and B in 12 is only talking about men. So that's a very easy way of, even if you have no idea what's going on, get rid of it. It's not answering the question. 16, 18, does this talk about the status of women relative to that of men? He may coerce by the combination of public sentiment. He may drive by physical force. He does not outstep the boundaries of his sphere. He. This is only talking about men. This has nothing to do with women. Again, another easy way to get rid of C. Not possible, because it's not talking about women with respect to men. It's only talking about what men do. What about 41 to 46? But whatever in any measure throws a woman into the attitude of a combatant, either for herself or others, whatever binds her in a party conflict, whatever obliges her in any way to exert coercive influence, throws her out of her appropriate sphere. This is only talking about women. It's just saying the status of women relative to that of men. It's saying that if women do these things, if women become a combatant, if women binds herself in a party conflict, if women exert coercive influences, this throws women out of her appropriate sphere. That doesn't say anything about what men do. So that was this was a really nice question to go over, because if we just had this laser focus on answering the question to number 11, what's the status of women relative to men? Status of women relative to men. And you have that as your only sole goal. You realize for 12, B, C, and D never talk about both men and women in the same quote. The only one that talks about men and women together is A for 12, which directly supports B for number 11. While women hold a subordinate relation than the other sex than men, it was not because it was designed that our duties or influence should be any less important than men. So it's talking about both of them. The answer number 12 is going to be A, and the answer number 11 that nicely matches up to that is going to be B.